Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. And well, it's story time again tonight. I'm going to tell you about one of the most successful but also most ambitious magical workings that I've ever engaged in my spiritual life, at least to date. And that working is the Gebofal Ritual. I'm going to do a few videos on my experience preparing for and putting myself through this 49-day Gebofal Ritual. The Gebofal Ritual is of course an Enochian ritual, and I've spoken about it a little bit in my previous videos on Enochian, which I'll link in the description below. But basically, there's a number of gates that must be opened using a number of different invocations or calls, which refer to a set of tables that were received by the Elizabethan magicians John Dee and Edward Kelley. The Gebofal Ritual, as Enochian magic, is a form of angelic magic. It's all about scrying the levels of the heavens and receiving divine communications. In trying to reconstruct this 49-day Gebofal Ritual, there's one big problem, which is that John Dee and Edward Kelley, when they were engaging in their own scrying sessions to receive all of the different components that were necessary for this ritual, there were some that were missing. There were some that were never given. One of these was what's referred to as the First Table of Loagaeth, where there was supposed to be a set of 49 tables in total for that book. And then the other component is one of the 49 calls that I mentioned before. There were meant to be 49 calls, each of which acted as a key to open up a different level of the heavens, but only 48 were given. So to complete the Gebofal Ritual, it would be necessary to recite the 48 calls that were given to Dee and Kelley, as well as the 49th that was never given. I believe that I have found the 49th call, and I also believe that I have ascertained the design of the First Table of Loagaeth. So tonight I'm going to tell you about my journey as I prepared for the Gebofal Ritual. So when I reached a point in my life as a young magician, when I'd finished dabbling and I wanted to get serious about finding a school where I could learn more about magic and mysticism, I came across the most well-known Thelemic orders that people might be familiar with if they're familiar with Western ceremonial magic. And so the curriculum that I was studying included a number of different types of magic which come down to us from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. One of those was Enochian. I'd done a little bit of experimentation with Enochian magic before, but now I really had a chance to do a deep dive into the Enochian magical system. I borrowed a book from the OTO library in my local body, which some of you might have heard of. It's called The Vision and the Voice, and this is where I really began to delve into Enochian magic in a serious way. I was very impressed by the visions that Aleister Crowley was able to get by scrying the 30 ethers in the Enochian system during his time in the desert of Algeria. And it was breathtaking to read those visions, and I wanted to try scrying the ethers for myself. So I scryed the first few. I was very impressed with the results. But I was still a relatively green young magician. I felt like I was a bit out of my depth working my way through the 30 ethers. So I decided to park my Enochian workings. But I was determined to one day revisit the 30 ethers and complete scryings of all 30 ethers. Now, as the years went on, I researched Enochian magic further as part of my inevitable studies of the occult. And during my studies, I discovered the Gebofal Ritual, this incredible ritual of angelic magic of biblical proportions, quite literally. I learnt that the 30 ethers were only one level of the Enochian cosmos, and the calls to open them were only one part of the Enochian system, and that in fact there were 19 other calls which could be used to open still other levels of the Enochian universe, of the Enochian heavens, so that there were a total of 49 calls to open 49 gates. The angels that spoke to John Dee and Edward Kelley told them that there was a great working, a great ritual called the Gebofal Ritual, where the objective was to open each one of these 49 gates consecutively to receive a vision of divinity, to receive a great revelation, which could bring new spiritual knowledge to humankind. And much of the legend that has grown up around the Gebofal Ritual has a lot of apocalypticism woven into it. And in fact, another name that has been given to this ritual is the Enochian apocalypse working. But apocalypse does not necessarily mean the end times. It can just as easily refer to a divine revelation of any kind. So now I revised my old ambition. I no longer just wanted to scry the 30 ethers. I wanted to open all 49 gates. And I was looking into how to do this based on the Enochian sources that I had at my disposal at the time. And I was amazed to find out that no one had really seriously attempted the Gebofal Ritual before. There were a couple of people who were documented as attempting it, but none of them made use of a 49th call. None of them even seemed to have tried to discover it. There was one instance that I found online with Vincent Bridges and a few people who attempted this working, but the 49th call was simply silence, whereas the angels are quite explicit that the 49th call is another call. It is not simply to sit in silence. It is just that the angels have not given that call to humanity, or at least they hadn't, up until a few years ago. And then the other version of the Enochian apocalypse working that I was able to find simply used the call for the ethers, and instead of putting the name of an ether in the call, it used the word Diak, which comes from the Enochian tablet of NoMBe, which seems unrelated to the Gebofal Ritual. So no serious attempt had been made to truly find the 49th call, and I wanted to set that right. And although there's a lot of superstition and a lot of legend around the Gebofal Ritual, I wanted to approach this from the perspective of scientific illuminism, such as is taught in the Argentium Astrum. That is, when you're dealing with magic, the basic premise is that if you do certain things, certain results will follow. I knew that John Dee and Edward Kelley had received the first 48 calls by doing a particular type of ritual to enter into a scrying session to communicate with the Enochian angels and receive the call from them. And my solution to how to track down the 49th call was really quite simple. I'll just replicate the ritual that Dee and Kelley used to get the first 48 calls. And that's exactly what I did. My main platform was a WordPress blog that I was running under my magical name at the time, Frata Sorath, back when I was a bit more dark and spooky than I am now, with my new magical name of Frata Eleftheria. But at the time I was going by Frata Sorath as my magical pseudonym, and my main platform was my blog, The Black Solstice. And I published my account both of the working that I undertook to receive the missing Enochian call, as well as the 49-day Gebofal Ritual on that blog, where they remain to this day. So the full details of the ritual to receive the missing call are there. It's just a basic Enochian scrying ritual. There was one difference though. I made use of a Enochian table that I had created which was my reconstruction of the First Table of Loagaeth. This is the second component of the Enochian system that was missing, that was necessary to complete the Gebofal Ritual. So all of the other tables in Loagaeth, the other 48, Dee and Kelley got given detailed descriptions of each one by the angels, and they dutifully copied those tables down. The first table, however, they were given the words that would be used, but Dee and Kelley never arranged those letters in the correct format. The angels gave them a rough idea of how the table should appear and how the words should appear in the table, but they don't seem to have ever created a version of the table anyway. So that was the other thing that I did. I was able to source the other 48 online, but in order to complete the Gebofal Ritual, I would need a copy of the 49th table that was complete, that had been designed and created, so that I could have it on hand together with the rest of the tables. And I did design it based on the instructions in a true and faithful relation, and based on what I think the most elegant design would be for such a table. And I had this with me nearby when I was doing the Gebofal Ritual, but also when I was receiving the missing call. Now, I had a bit of a misconception about the role of this first table in the working. When I first published my accounts, I read a bad source which said that the first table corresponds to the missing call that I was trying to receive, which opens up the very highest level of the Enochian heavens, whereas it seems that this first table was to do with the very lowest layer of the Enochian heavens, opened by the lowest call. But it's of no consequence, because to receive the calls, the tables weren't strictly necessary anyway, and the important thing with the tables was that there was a complete set on hand nearby for the Gebofal Ritual. So that condition had been realized. Anyway, I conducted the scrying session, having set up my ritual to try and receive the missing Enochian call, according to the methods of Dee and Kelley. I focused on the scrying crystal and I closed my eyes, and I began to receive messages. What I received was individual Enochian words. One Enochian word at a time came through, and I wrote it down. I would wait for an individual word and I'd write it down. I'd wait for the next word and I'd write that down. Until at last I had a complete list of words that could comprise the call. I must stress as well, I didn't receive any of the words in English. I received the words in Enochian, which I would then have to translate. I didn't know the meanings of words off by heart, but I was familiar with certain Enochian words without knowing the meanings of them. And so that was the context in which I received these Enochian words in the ritual. There are a few words that didn't come through that clearly, but it was obvious what word that they were trying to form, so I just made corrections there. The angels also gave me further instruction to move one word and then add an additional word. There were certain words that I received in Enochian that didn't have a meaning in the Enochian dictionary. The angels had to give the meanings of those words to me in the scrying ritual, because they were new Enochian words that didn't have an English translation yet. So this is the piece of paper all those years ago that I received the words on. I had a row here and here for the words as they were received. Every second row was when I would write the translations in, and you can see there's where one word was moved and there's where one word was added here. as per the angel's instructions, which is on the back here. So that's the call in its original form. And after that, they confirmed I had all the information that I needed for the call, and that the call was before me. All that now remained for me to do was to fix up the grammar, because the correct grammatical format is not always obvious with Enochian sentences. So I translated the call into English and I fixed the grammar, and then I looked at what had been received, and I was astonished to find that it was coherent and it touched upon very relevant themes for what I was trying to do with the call. And the call that I had received, that I had now fully compiled and tweaked, which the Enochian angels claimed was the missing call of the Gebofal Ritual, sounded like this. Flames, let them hear, they who make, that were. Come you to reign amongst your crossing of flames. Let them hear, to whom, stooping, stretch forth to have made. O you heavens as a widow, truth be proven in the great force of a through-thrusting fire. Come away, O you to whom the earth, time, and God are mighty. Show yourselves, open the mysteries of your creation. Behold, the crossing of flames. So there are a few things which were immediately noticeable from this call. One thing that is immediately apparent with this call is that there is one word in particular which seems to be repeated more than the others, and that is the Enochian word, purge. This word means flames. Whatever it was being invoked by this call, it had very fiery symbolism to it. I believe that this is a faithful account of the level of the heavens that this particular call is meant to be opening up. As with the other calls, it gives a description of the realm that it is opening up. If you think about the medieval view of the cosmos, the very highest heavens were known as the Empyrean. This was a realm of pure fire, a realm that was filled with the holy fire of God. And as the missing call was designed to open up the highest level of the Enochian cosmos, it makes sense that this too, like the Empyrean, would be a realm of fire. There's also references to the through-thrusting fire, which is also referred to in at least one other Enochian call. For reasons I'll explain in another video, I considered the governor, if you will, of this last missing level of the Enochian cosmos to be Para Owan. This angel is one who Dee and Kelley describe as being very fiery in nature, in terms of the influence that they can have on the world. So again, we have that fiery symbolism. Another thing which is very noticeable is the reference to those who make, or those who have made. It almost seems like a reference is being made here to a very high-ranking angelic hierarchy that were involved in the process of creation, perhaps the Elohim, or perhaps it's referring to the Logos, or different aspects of the Logos, the Word of God, which would certainly fit with what the final call is supposed to open up. It's supposed to open up the realm of the Logos, the mysteries of the Christ, pre and post-incarnation, the kind of cosmic aspects of the Christ principle, among other things. And the other very cryptic reference in this call is to the heavens being a widow, or like a widow. This could be a reference to the death of God, a la Nietzschean philosophy, as we live through apocalyptic times where our assumptions about humanity and spirituality are turned upside down. Or perhaps it's a reference to the fact that the earth is the consort of the heavens, and the earth has died to its former consort, the Queen of Heaven, who now mourns the loss of that relationship. Both of these possibilities are very intriguing. And there is reference to the truth being proven. So a new truth is being revealed, just as promised by the angels, when they talked about what the result would be when the 49th gate was finally opened. So I was very excited to find that all of the messages of this call that I had received seemed to be very consistent with what the final call was supposed to achieve. This was very compelling verification for me. But the only way to really prove if this was truly the 49th call was to take it for a spin, take it for a test drive. And this is what I would do during my working of opening all 49 gates of the Enochian cosmos by reading all 49 calls one day after the other for 49 days. And I will make another video about that. Perhaps I will do another one giving a performance or a recitation of the different translations of the missing call first. But there is also a video on the story of when I completed the Gebofal Ritual, which is coming up very soon. So if you've enjoyed this video and you are enjoying my Enochian content, stay tuned for that. But please also like this video and subscribe to my channel to support my work so you can also get notified when that video comes up. Any questions or comments you have, leave them down below. I'll try and get to them when I can. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time for the next exciting chapter of this story.